Welcome back to Fandom at Random Horror Edition, which I am officially calling Horror at Random. I'm here with Justine. I always screw that. Just enough.
Just enough.
Yeah, just enough. And I got a logo and everything to go for it. So next video we do, hopefully I'll have that up. But yeah,
That's
so
exciting. I'm glad you're branching off.
Thank you. This is kind of a spin-off. I always got to promote my other podcast, Fandom at Random. Go to fandomatrandom.com. You can catch episodes, merch, all that good stuff. And while we're at it, Justine, you can go ahead and promote yourself.
Yeah, I'm JustineUFF. You can find me on TikTok at JustineUFF. I also am part of a podcast with 3 other creators. She Needs a Priest, who's been on here before, Sam.
Yes.
And Creepin' It Spooky and Emma of the Impact. We're all from TikTok, and we started our own podcast called Let Us In Podcast. We're on YouTube, and our second episode just dropped this last Friday. And our first episode, Uncut, dropped last Wednesday on where you can listen to podcasts.
It is good. I've watched it, guys. You guys have good chemistry, and honestly, I haven't seen the second video yet, but I love it. I
like the second one more than the first so far. So
always the case.
We discuss women in horror, and that's really important for us to touch on as 4 women who are obsessed with horror.
Absolutely. That's definitely going to be a good one. Yeah, because I locked up on my first podcast episode ever, and it was the most embarrassing thing ever. But we don't edit, so it was in.
We do edit, so a little less stressful.
Oh, man. Anyway, yeah, guys, go and check it out because, like I said, I've seen the first video. It was amazing. But, yeah, today...
Sorry. Go ahead. And then I'm also launching my own podcast, which will be called Dirty Horror with JustineUFF. And my first episode is filmed. I'm editing it, and I should drop it next week.
There you go. It looks like we're both trying to get into this thing where we're doing our own thing, but we're also doing our thing with the other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Stressful as fuck, but it's worth it.
It is stressful, but at least it's like a fulfilling hobby. So
yeah,
it's good stress.
Right. Like I work full time at a job I barely like. I'm gonna do shit I love after,
Exactly. It's a passion project.
Yep, absolutely. Speaking of passion projects, what we are doing today, we're calling it Straightforward Decades of Horror. And it's gonna be a multi-part series that's going to bounce between me and Justine's channel. I'm excited about it because we're going to start with the 70s and then move on up all the way until the current day. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, there's a lot of horror movies before the 70s, blah, blah, blah. I know this. Yes, I realize this, right? We can mention Night of the Living Dead, The Birds. There's
Eddie Hitchcock.
Peeping Tom. You can mention a lot of horror, but we thought it was best. The 70s arguably is the best kickoff decade for horror. Do you agree?
I agree. I think this is when horror was really embraced, and I think that the major horror community began in the 70s. I think that's when everybody started to really talk and band together around horror.
Right.
And the love of horror really kind of solidified.
Yeah. And it's when blood and brutality and dark themes really took a shape of its own, because
it's also when they started thinking about ratings.
Yeah, exactly.
Like how are we gonna rate this? Because this is when they started to wonder what should be put out there to the masses. And horror did that.
Because until Red Dawn, if I'm not mistaken, we didn't even have a PG-13.
No.
So it was either PG or rated R.
Yeah.
So that must have been real. Anyway, so we'll get into it. But we're starting off in the 70s. Me and Justine have both picked our movies to basically talk about how influential they were to modern day horror.
And why they're just my favorites, probably.
Yeah, and why they're our favorite movies. Yeah.
I picked my films from my top 100 list. So right off the bat, these are films that I love.
Yes.
I didn't pick anything outside of that list because I wanted to make sure it was something I could passionately talk about.
Absolutely. And I left a lot off because I think some of my favorites from the 70s arguably aren't just as influential as some of the ones I put on here, but I'm glad because me and Justine talked before this. She's got a good few picks that I'm glad to talk about too. So
Yeah.
Let's get into it. I kind of did a timeline here. Justine did her own thing, so we're just gonna bounce back and forth. Gonna have a conversation, kind of free ball it. I'm gonna start with The Exorcist, 1973.
Perfect.
Because how do you talk about the 70s without that famous movie? You know what I mean?
How do you talk about horror without addressing The Exorcist and what it's done for religious horror?
Yeah. I mean, first thing off the bat is Catholics back then were hardcore, and religion and Christianity was just really heavy in the 70s. And this movie came along and basically shoved the crucifix right up its ass.
It went right up some places for sure.
Yeah. But it's, this movie came out in the theaters, and until 2017, I believe, when it released, it was the highest grossing horror movie ever.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I think I've talked to a few religious people who also, like, very religious Catholics who like The Exorcist. They like what it did for the faith, actually, that it kind of materialized or made concrete for people to witness the horrors of the devil and demons and how susceptible we are, even children. And I think that's really interesting because I didn't have the same reaction the first time I watched The Exorcist. I was very young. I didn't understand it. It went right over my head. I fell asleep, I think, and it didn't really scare me. But again, it's because I just didn't grasp the concepts until I was much older, where I could appreciate it more.
Right. Now, so I grew up, I saw horror very early with Nightmare on Elm Street 2, like 5, I think. But I grew up with my grandmother. My whole family was Catholic, and my grandmother always telling me, The Exorcist is the scariest movie I've ever seen. I almost passed out, blah, 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 blah. Now, it's worth mentioning, me and Justine, I think, are kind of on the same level with controversial opinions. And I think we both agree that The Exorcist, while an amazing, influential movie, might not be on our top 10 list.
That's true. Yeah, I think it is an unpopular opinion of mine. While I respect the film and I do like it and enjoy it, and I think it's a great film, I don't even think it broke into my top 100, which is probably
now
blasphemy.
That's ballsy and blasphemous, but I respect it because it's definitely on my top 100. But so what I was getting at was my grandmother always hyped it up as the scariest movie ever. When I finally watched it when I was 10, maybe, I was like, are you kidding me? I've already seen Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Pumpkinhead, and a bunch of other shit. This is nothing,
Right.
Now, so while it's respectable, while I completely understand the importance of this movie, it still it doesn't hold up.
Right. And so just to clarify, my top 100 heavily is rated based off of what I consider rewatchability.
Yes.
And for me, if I'm watching a film over and over and I just keep coming back to it, that's a good movie. That's it. That's in my top 100. I've watched The Exorcist a handful of times.
Yeah, I'd say me too.
Like,
definitely.
For it being a horror film that's so remarkable, to me, it's just not rewatchable, in my opinion. It's just not my thing. Yeah. But I could say that about most religious horror. Possession movies, like demon films, exorcism films are not my favorite. They're great, but they're typically a one and done for me. I like it, I enjoy it, I rate it, and I move on. They're not rewatchable to me.
See, now I am the opposite. I love religious horror, Satanism, all that good shit, but rarely is it done good enough to where I have to rewatch it.
I love it when it's around cults.
Yes.
I love cults in horror so much, and I rewatch a lot of those, and I will actually get into one of those.
Awesome.
I could talk about it right now, actually. One of the ones from the 70s I love is The Wicker Man.
Okay,
one of my favorites.
Okay, so talk about blasphemous. I haven't seen the original Wicker Man yet.
Oh, so definitely watch it. It is a trip. I think it's visually really pleasing. It gives me like a if you watch Midsummer. it's very colorful like that. It has, I mean, they're both very similar in style and tone.
Right.
But it's, you know, it's the 70s, so it's got that hippie 70s-esque kind of vibe going on. It's a trip, and I really enjoy, like I said, cult horror, but that one also was such a surprise. You didn't expect the ending. You don't. It's a brutal ending, and
Okay.
I love it.
Actually, you know what? This is a good time to do. We're talking about the 70s, guys. If you haven't seen these movies, you're probably never going to see them, but spoilers. We are
Spoilers.
going to be talking spoilers about these movies. Now,
Well, you've seen the remake, right?
yeah, I've seen the remake, so go ahead and talk about the ending now that we've let the spoiler tag out.
The remake doesn't stray too far from that. I mean, he is burned alive in The Wicker Man. So,
Okay, yeah.
like,
So
that all happens, but there's a little bit more treachery and surprise, I think, in the original than what you get from the remake. The remake gets a little silly sometimes, which really takes away from that, like, whodunit vibe that the original Wicker Man has. So think of like a whodunit film that is kind of trippy, like a trippy whodunit.
All right, cool. I'm into
with
it.
Cult horror. Yeah, and the acting is phenomenal. I really, it has that 70s acting, like the beat
like
cop style 70s.
Last House on the Left, kind of weird acting.
Yeah, and I love that about the 70s. I love those caricatures that you got from then. That like Burt Reynolds-esque kind of leader. Like,
absolutely. I mean, you still had cliches, but they were new and they were refreshing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
The Wicker Man.
The Wicker Man is definitely one of my favorites, and that's from 1973. So this is also an early film.
All right, awesome.
As well. So it kind of kept us in order chronologically.
Yeah, here we go. See, now I'm gonna have to check it out because it's been on my list. I don't know about you, but I know I have a need to watch list that I never remember that I have to watch all these, and Wicker Man's one of them.
Yeah, and if you're fans of like Christopher Lee, he's in it. And then it's directed by Robin Hardy, by the way.
Okay. Yep.
Drop some facts.
Yeah. All right. All right. And so that's good. So that's your movie. We talked about The Exorcist. And then my next movie is going to be Black Christmas 1974, jumping into the next year.
Perfect.
So, all right, we're going to be talking about a certain slasher that came out in the 70s that might be just a little bit popular and might have a big following. And they might say that it started the slasher drama. I mean, slasher genre. Yeah. I don't agree. I think Black Christmas 1974 is what inspired this said movie. And I'm not going to name it because we're going to talk about it. But not only did it do that, it also turned Christmas into an evil thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, I love holiday horror so much. And
me too.
This is the angel on the top of the tree of Christmas horror. So
yeah.
This is like the star, like the tree topper of Christmas horror. Yeah, I really love Black Christmas. I think it's much more of the framework that we have in most slasher films.
Yes.
Where, you know, the one that you mentioned, alluded to earlier, Halloween, had more of a slow, steady stalk.
Yeah.
And a little less brutality in the first one. I would say that Halloween franchise actually became more like Black Christmas as it kind of went on.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like the fact that Black Christmas kind of stands out like that, because I don't know very many people when they're asked, like, what are some of your favorite slashers? I don't know a lot of people that don't mention Black Christmas. So why doesn't it get the same love and recognition?
Because I'm convinced it's because, first of all, it talked about abortion in a time where that wasn't very acceptable. Not only that, but it kind of took away from the sanctity of a religious holiday. And because there's basically no blood. I mean, if you really look back at that movie, it was a lot of less is more. Kind of like my next movie on my list we'll talk about. But Yeah, and then not only that, but the phone calls itself really differentiated it from a lot of slasher movies that came after it. So I think a lot of factors went into it just being a kind of unrecognized in the general horror opinion rather than hardcore horror fans.
I I think it also has a soft spot for me because I love single set horror. So
Hmm.
having a horror film that's predominantly in one location, in this case a house,
Yeah,
I think that's really effective because you typically feel safe at home. And this film, it made you not feel so safe at home, even
right.
amongst friends. Like you're surrounded by people,
Yeah.
they're all getting picked off. Like
Yeah.
that's really scary. And I think when a stranger calls is the next time you really feel that in a
Hmm.
in that type of setting. So I think it's such a great slasher.
It really is. It for me, it's definitely very high. Could even break my top 5 on slasher films. Not even that, but horror films, period. And I mean, we got
Yeah.
John Saxon as the cop, who my favorite slasher series, Nightmare on Elm Street, every and Jess was just such a good final girl. She her
Yes,
acting was
yes.
great. There was a lot of complexity to her character, so it all really was nice. And then the open-ended ending, really.
I love ambiguity in films. I talk about this a lot. I think I talk about ambiguity as much as I talk about Ripley,
Yeah.
which I talk about a lot.
Yeah.
But
Well,
ambiguity is one of, like, I think the most crucial aspects of storytelling in horror, because a lot of what we're afraid of is so subjective. So when you leave things open-ended, people's own fears fill in the gaps. And as long as it's just the right amount to not like lose your audience, it draws a connection to your audience where
yeah.
they feel more immersed in the film because now they're drawing their own conclusions, they're building their own story, and it's inserting a little bit more fear. And I think it's just effective as hell.
It's
So
kind of like a Mad Lib where you get kind of the gist of the story, and then when you
mhm,
fill in your own words slash thoughts, it really turns into a personal story and you can relate to it. So I think you're
yeah.
completely right about that. And actually, you just talked about a movie on your TikTok, The Empty Man, with a very
Yeah.
ambiguous ending that I think paid off big time. Not
Big
to get
time.
out of the 70s, but just to throw
Nobody
it out
talks
there.
about that movie enough, and it kind of
No.
just snuck in there, and I think it's so good. So go
Yeah.
see Empty Man.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
it's a quite interesting story. So
Yes. So Black Christmas, directed by Bob Clark. If you haven't seen it, go and check it out and let us
just
know
the
what you
right
think
amount
of
of
it.
horror and gore, much like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Absolutely. Is that what's next on your list?
Well, I think it's technically next on both of our lists because
Hmm.
it's 1974. So if we're kind of staying chronological here, it
Might as
only
well
makes
talk
sense.
about it, right? Texas Chainsaw Massacre did so many things, but at the same time, uh, did it with such like a low budget and weird setting. Let's talk about it. Texas Chainsaw 1974, director Toby Hooper, Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface, and Marilyn Burns as Sally. First of all, what do you think of it?
I think it's one of the greatest slaughterhouse horrors out there. A film that really, I think, lives in everybody's minds. Whenever they think of horror, you have to think of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And for being such a brutal film, it really leaves a lot up to your own imagination. And again, that ambiguity sneaking in
Yeah,
there. But it's such a uh, gut wrenching film. You you feel there. I mean, the way that they filmed it and how they did their shots and the way they used lighting, natural lighting, and the way they lit up the house, the interior, every detail of that film felt so well thought out for like the perfect horror that I
yeah.
don't know of many films today that don't take something from this film, that
No,
don't take some sort of, oh, I really liked that. I'm gonna do that.
exactly.
Detail from it. It's an iconic film.
So yeah, and this is one of my favorite horror films of all time. And I've read the book, I've seen the documentary. The
Mm,
thing about this movie is the filming and the production itself really lended to the movie, because in that van at the beginning of the movie, they're all in this van in 110-degree weather in Texas, and they're sweating their asses off. They're claustrophobic. They're all kind of tense anyway.
Gritty.
And then you throw crazy dude in there. His name is slipping my mind right now, but like you said, it made it really feel like you were in there with them, you know?
Right. Great POV shots almost, where as if you were there, even though it's not technically a POV, but it feels like one, because as an audience, you don't typically see shots from low behind in the back of the van. Those aren't normal shots that we're used to. I think that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre also just defined 70 horror's cinematography. The way that they did those slow pan out shots to really kind of scale the desolation that you feel at this location is just, it's smart. And then the like dramatic chainsaw dance scene at the end, that I love that so much.
Gunnar Hansen does not get enough credit compared to other slashers as far as acting with a mask on with no voice. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And they had $140,000 budget. I was just looking that up, sorry, but $140,000 budget.
Nothing for film.
And I think the key was they took the climate and the state of Texas as kind of a character of its own, to be honest.
Absolutely, yeah.
And overall, it just, in the end, like you said, Leatherface was an instant classic villain. And then I love the fact that people look back on it like, oh, it was so bloody and brutal.
It was not really.
Scenes, I think, in the whole movie where we actually saw blood, and even then it wasn't that much at all.
More of a splattering. And
it's a testament to how impactful it was to your mental state, but also not showing a lot, you know?
Yeah, again, leaving a lot up to your audience's imagination. It also, you're not treating them like they're stupid. So, I mean, we know what's gonna happen behind that door when he slams it shut. Like, what a scene!
Oh my god!
The sound of it.
I think that was probably that sound. Besides Franklin's kill, which let's mention too, that I think this is one of the first horror movies to really put like a disabled person in the movie and then have him get brutally slaughtered. That just made you feel ultimately double bad.
Anybody can die. Well, they also kind of made him a really annoying character, though.
They did, and I guess he was super fucking
terrible
annoying.
Personality on him.
Behind the scenes, he was playing Franklin the whole time too, because he was trying to method act.
Oh,
and
like
I guess
method actor.
All the actors were very happy that he got nicked out. Right. So overall, in the future, we got Rob Zombie, who obviously takes heavy influences from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then multiple remakes. Actually, me and you did a video on, or did we?
Yeah, we did. On the
I was gonna say, I know we talked
Chainsaw
about
reboot.
Multiple remakes of franchise, maybe not one of the better franchises out there as a whole, but it has spawned many clones, remakes, and interpretations of the film. So
I think a better film to look to today, if you're looking for something that's paying kind of homage to the 70s, would be the new Ty West X film. Which I think was the first time I've seen a movie kind of film like the 70s and just get it right, just nail it. Every shot, every choice they made on cinematography just felt like straight out of a slaughterhouse 70s film.
Completely
just
agree.
A brilliant movie. I really that one broke into my top 13, honestly.
Now, did you guys Let Us In podcast did a review, and it's not released yet, right?
No, that's going to be coming out this Friday.
Okay,
so Friday on YouTube, we'll be dropping our
I know review. Sam's score, and I know how she felt about it, and I know how you felt about it. Was there a good conversation between you guys about the differences and what you thought about it? Yeah,
I think so. I think I'm hoping that I know I enlightened them a little bit on some of my points of view on it and perspective on it, which is why I love our podcast so much, because there's 4 of us and we don't always agree on our feelings about a film.
Yeah.
But it's so nice to hear other people's perspectives, because the way I felt from that film versus the way they felt was just completely the opposite in some areas.
Wow.
I felt there was a lot of character development in the first half, and some people did not feel that way. I felt a real deep connection to that film. I literally tweeted Ty West afterwards, which I don't even think he's on Twitter, but I hashtagged him.
Oh, wow.
I said, I love you, Ty West. I love you too. I felt like you were telling us this is a love letter to us, like horror fanatics.
All right. See, I think I fell in between you and Sam on my rating after sitting with it. So not to get into it, but yeah, after sitting with it too much, I mean, a little bit. So I'm interested to see the video, because honestly, I would love to hear all your different opinions on it. But yeah,
check it out this Friday. I think it's around 2 p.m. PST.
Okay.
It usually drops on Fridays. I do recommend to watch it if you're looking for that 70s feel, but you're not maybe a fan of old films. That's totally a legitimate thing. I understand that people feel that way. Check out X if you want to get that feeling, though, that nostalgia.
Kind of modernized 70s movie.
Yeah. And so on to the next film.
Yes.
This one,
bring us the next one.
I think this is one of the films where I can confidently say there has never been a movie this good about this subject ever. Nothing has ever touched this film, and it's Jaws.
Absolutely.
I cannot say there's any movie that is even close to dethroning Jaws from the shark water horror.
No.
It's just king.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I've never actually really thought of it that way, because even water creature features, you can't think of something that top Jaws. And
nothing can.
And we were talking before we started this cast. It completely slipped my mind for 70 movies. Don't ask me why, but 75 was the year Jaws came out and made everybody afraid of the water. My mother talked about this movie. So my grandmother was the Exorcist. My mother was Jaws. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm
nothing has
terrified of
touched
the water.
The only thing. Yeah, even off the top of my head, maybe the creature from Black Lagoon, but that's like a swamp, a lagoon. That doesn't even make sense, you know?
And it's so different, because the creature from the Black Lagoon, you're not particularly afraid of. You're actually, you sympathize. He's a sympathetic creature. So
yeah,
I don't sympathize with the shark from Jaws. I am terrified of it. So I find this film really impacts me. Every time I watch it, I'm still like, I still jump at certain scenes. I'm still like really freaked out by certain scenes. The opening scene to Jaws has lived in my mind since the first time I saw it. Every time I go in the water, whether there's possibility of sharks or not, I think of that scene. It's especially if I'm swimming at night. And I have this story of a time that I dove off of a pier in Lake Washington and swam in the water, and immediately thought of that opening scene. And it was midnight, and I freaked myself out and like swam faster than I've ever swam back to the dock, because this one scene snuck into my brain.
That's how it happens with Jaws. When you're swimming, you don't even know you're about to think about it, but all of a sudden it's midnight, you jump in the lake, you're probably, I don't know, 4 whiskey sours deep or something like that, and you're like, shit, oh my god, what's happening?
What was I thinking? Like, no cares until I hit the water, and I was like, oh my god, the way I was swimming just casually back to the dock at first reminded me of that opening scene where she's just swimming along, and you can see her up, from underneath, and it's the and it just gets closer to her foot, and then she's just bloop.
And then the machine that whips her back and forth. I'm like, I watched it recently this past summer, again, for the first time in maybe 5-6 years, and it still holds up. That first scene still holds up. And all I can think about is how good Steven Spielberg did at filming this movie with all the troubles they had.
Yeah, and the animatronics were so smart to use something that looked so realistic. The care that they took into this film, and the shots. I mean, some of those shots were were innovative as F. Like
So
the
one
one where
thing,
it zooms in on him on the beach.
yeah.
Coolest shot. I love
hmm
that shot.
And I'm not. I actually never realized this until my last rewatch, but the shot where the red comet passes behind him on the boat, I never
Yeah,
realized that actually happened, and it's a real scene. They didn't add special
I
effects. They
didn't
just
know
happened.
that.
Yeah, they just happened to catch it, and it's such a small scene, but it's like I looked it up online after, and it's like one of the most beautiful scenes of Jaws happened by accident.
That's so
It
cool.
was like a scene that was meant to be in the movie.
Yeah. I think that one shot I was talking about just a second ago, where it zooms into him as he realizes there's a shark in the
Yeah,
water. They're all kind of enjoying the beach. That scene, it looks almost like he just kind of zoomed in on him, but
right.
that's actually a track. They put a track in front of him, and they ran the camera up to him
Yeah.
during that shot, and it's just so effective because it zooms everything behind him, just kind of goes further away as you get closer, you know?
It's kind of like Hitchcockian almost,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it really focuses in on his fear. And it's actually to call back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. People nowadays, nowadays are spoiled as shit because Texas Chainsaw, they had to move tracks as they were rolling the camera, as they were following her into the house. Jaws, they had to zoom in using the track. Like, and some of that shit ended up working to make way better movies in the 70s.
Right. And I think Jaws is definitely one of those films that holds up today. They also, the humor that they used in it, because there's a lot of humor in it. It's got
Yeah,
some funny parts. It's ageless humor. They went really tasteful with it, which made this film uh easy to be a classic. Like, it's not a film that you go back and you watch it and you're like, "Oh, nobody could say that today."
yeah, right. They
And that's
really,
so good.
and that's a testament to Spielberg himself. I think he has been master at really knowing the balance between showing and not showing and telling and not telling. You know what I mean? If that
Oh,
makes any
yeah.
sense.
You could easily take out some of the real horrifying scenes from this film, and it would be just a family thriller. Like,
Yeah,
if you
absolutely.
took away the blood, the bodies, and the actual deaths, and you just inserted, discussion about what happened, you
Yeah.
could make this into like almost like a mystery drama thriller, and everything would have been really consumable. But I'm so glad he didn't. I'm so glad it's a horror film. It is,
Yes. Oh my
yeah,
god,
it's
it's
one of the scariest.
honestly, it's probably one of the very few movies that I would call as close to perfect as you can get.
I agree. I would
Yeah.
call this movie perfect.
Yeah. I don't
I
know if
called
I
The
can.
Thing perfect. I called Doctor Sleep perfect. I can call
Yeah.
Jaws perfect.
And I agree. I think if there was ever a film that could be called perfect, Jaws is and The Thing are both two of them.
Right.
And like you said, nothing. If anyone watching this video right now can think of anything that even comes within the boxing ring of Jaws, let us know
Yeah.
because right
Same
off,
weight class. We need the
yeah,
same weight class.
seriously, because I'm not thinking of anything right now. And
I mean, I can think of some great films about like sharks.
mm,
Like, I know a few, but they are nothing like Jaws. They're
no,
not even
not on the same level.
close.
They're great, but not
It's
on the
like,
same level.
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, this is probably one of the few films we'll talk about in the 70s that is unmatched, hasn't had anything even come close to it yet.
Agree. Agree.
So I have another one next on my list, but I think we can hold off on that. What's your next movie?
My next movie is Carrie
All
from
right, yeah,
Stephen
see, that's
King.
good. We can talk about a Stephen King film. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Carrie, I think, is one of the coolest. It's an interesting film because this was really when you saw a woman kind of antagonist character that you're still sympathetic to.
Yeah.
And I mean, Stephen King's work is just amazing. So I love most adaptations of his work in some degree, but I think Carrie was groundbreaking for kind of the time that it came out. And Sissy Spacek, of course, phenomenal in the role.
Yeah.
But again, you didn't really have a lot of female like killers or
No.
evils, like that femme monster kind of that wasn't really happening, and it was a good for her film, and we didn't get a lot of still don't have a lot of good for her films, and
No, we have
uh
more, but not a lot. Yeah,
and I love them. They're so cathartic.
absolutely.
Everybody wants to see the Mean Girls get it.
I mean, I'm not even a female, and I can appreciate a revenge film, like you said, get 'em film, and I can't
Yeah.
imagine how it is for a woman to watch it and like feel that power, you know? Like, I don't know, I Spit on Your Grave or Revenge. I mean, shit. I watch those movies, I'm like, fuck yeah. Now,
Yeah.
Carrie wasn't on the level of those movies, but
No, and that, in fact, that actually is really interesting because this film isn't a film about her getting like essayed or anything, which tends to
yeah,
be the go-to trope for revenge horror with leading women, and it's overdone. We don't need it anymore. But this one didn't have that. I mean, again, Stephen King didn't write that, so
no,
of course
yeah.
not.
He wrote a
Um,
lot of weird shit, but this wasn't
he
one of
did.
them. Yeah.
But you'll see a running theme in a lot of his work is generational trauma
Hmm.
and childhood trauma and how our parents are probably the most traumatic monsters in our lives. And Carrie really shows that, her mom was kind of the first bully to her. And the way that she was just kept from understanding anything about herself
Yeah.
is what led to this. This is what happens when shame is used to like house you to shield you from the world,
Right.
and for even becoming a woman, like being unhappy with the fact that you have a daughter and that being a woman is so shameful. It's just it's cathartic.
Yeah, it's really, it sums up like isolation, parental influence, and like you said, back in the day when some parts of being a woman were shameful, just like everything else back in the old days, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? And it really dialed in on that because, and then again,
Yeah.
religion, I feel like they tapped on in this as well, where it was just like,
That was her mother's choice weapon, was religion, for
yeah,
sure.
and she fed on those things happening to her, and the bullying
Yeah.
in school was kind of just
The
the little
straw.
push over the edge to,
Yeah.
yeah, and her mother wasn't in the path at the time, so all the kids in the in the dance room were.
Yeah, yeah, they were the straw that broke her and, unleashed her darkness that her mother was so afraid of.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
I loved it.
now it's important to note that when you talk about blood scenes in horror movies, you got The Shining and then you got Carrie.
Carrie,
Yeah.
yeah, iconic, the pig's blood scene, her just covered in blood in her eyes and like,
Yes.
oh, it's just
Yep.
iconic.
And
Absolutely.
it's another movie that spawned a few remakes and reboots. And I don't know about
Nothing's touched it.
you. The one with Chloe Grace Moretz was okay, but yeah, it
It was
hasn't
okay.
touched it. Yeah.
I think it was okay. It was Carrie who's just modernized. I just think that I don't know if I'm a fan of Chloe Grace Moretz yet. I haven't
Oh,
decided. I think I really liked her in Let the Right One In remake.
yep.
But I feel like that's because she doesn't talk that much.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I like her
uh,
yet. I don't
I
know if it's
like her.
her or the roles she's getting. You never know sometimes, but
I think a lot of the roles she's getting aren't great. I liked her in Kick Ass. She was
I did
funny,
like her in Kick Ass.
but as a horror scream queen kind of role, I'm not sure. I might be on
I'm
board
not
with you.
either.
Yeah.
I it's borderline Emma Roberts, where sometimes it feels like her acting is a little satirical or not serious. Like she
Yeah.
doesn't, which works for films like Kick Ass for sure.
Yeah.
Not so much films like Carrie. Carrie, I don't know. It was
Yeah.
okay.
It was okay. It was okay. It didn't touch the
Yeah.
original. Yeah. So I'm gonna save, let's just talk about Halloween now because that's what's next on my list. We
Perfect.
talk about enough in the horror community, so we're just gonna glaze over this one, right? 1978. I know it's a crime. I'm sorry, but 1978 Halloween was released. John Carpenter, with his low budget, made one of the best quote best slasher films ever made. Correct?
Right. It's a
At
great
least
slasher film.
in
The
general
first one I
opinion.
think is the best one, so
Yes.
I'm happy to talk about it quickly.
Hmm.
Um, but I do think it is talked about a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody is missing out on Halloween content.
No. And you can talk about how much it influenced the slasher genre, and as I've stated before, Black Christmas I think led to that, and then that led to that. So,
I think Halloween is a case study for building tension. The
yeah,
stalking silent killer, nobody did it better than John Carpenter's Halloween Michael Myers.
no,
So that is fantastic. The best scene in that film is when she's trying to get in the house and he's just walking towards her. Like
hmm
freaking terrifying.
oh my god,
And I love that. I love that he's just kind of there sometimes. And
he's
that's
Phantom
all he
like,
had to do.
and
Yeah.
it's really they kind of cradled the border of supernatural and human, and
Right.
never really clarified it, so it was good. And then one other thing you can really mention is the mask. I think besides Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think Halloween really dug the idea of a masked killer into the slasher genre.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of mask killers. It's
Hmm.
probably one of my favorite subgenres, knowing that Ghostface is my favorite.
Yeah, there you go, right?
And they both kind of ended up with their masks in similar ways just by happenstance. They needed something, they got something, and they went with it.
Yeah. So, it did an amazing it. Not only that, but I think it brought slasher to the mainstream audience, and there's no denying that John Carpenter made one of the best horror films ever with the budget he had. But
He
again,
was very good at that. Very
yeah,
good at that.
we've
John Carpenter's very talented with making something out of nothing.
yes, and I think anyone who's watching this video right now, God bless you. um,
Sorry.
I can edit that out if you want. Okay. No, I think anyone who's watching this video right now has probably heard anything and everything you could possibly hear about Halloween. So we're going to move on to Justine's next movie.
Mm. Yeah, my next film is Suspiria.
And I'm glad you mentioned this one because I left it off my list, even though I know it's huge for the 70s. So I'm glad you put it on here.
Yeah, so Suspiria being, Dario Argento, he is the Gallo kind of king, the one
Yes.
that you think of whenever you mention Gallo.
Yeah.
And if I'm pronouncing that right or
I,
wrong, I'm sorry.
that's
I've
how I
always heard it
pronounce
was
it.
like Jello, but Gia at the beginning, so Yellow,
Giallo.
Gallo,
Yeah.
Giallo. Yeah.
Sounds right to me.
Suspiria is another one of those 70s trippy horrors that I feel like really allowed artistic flair. It feels surreal when you watch it. They designed the production around that idea with making the doors larger and the doorknobs higher and bigger to make the girls seem more childlike
Yep.
and innocent. Again, I also love like cult films. So here we are again with
Absolutely,
another film that has the cult tendencies in it, right?
and not only
this is
that, but the Giallo colors. I remember this
yes,
commercial from the 90s. The colors, Duke, the colors, But
yeah,
no, seriously, I think the colors and the shots and the cinematography is really a big thing for the Giallo films.
it is. And I think I'm not actually super well versed in Giallo.
Me neither.
I I just know that I loved Suspiria, and I love a few other of his films, but Suspiria especially is one that I'm a huge fan of. I still watch this one today. I think it's a really interesting film to put on, just to put on and watch while you're doing stuff.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's like really nice to look at, and it has a really cool sound to it that is haunting. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a beautiful film. It has everything that I like about horror. So it has the cults, it has some like pretentious kind of
Mm.
artsy stuff
So
going on, which I like.
here's the thing, right? First of all, I know a lot of people might disagree, but surprisingly, a lot of people agree with me where I like the remake better.
I do too, actually. I
Oh,
agree.
okay.
I agree
See,
with you. I like the
now
remake better.
not only that, but I'm not a huge fan of Italian horror. I know, like, that's by horror standards you're supposed to be, but I'm not.
That's why I'm not really well versed in the giallo stuff either. I'm not.
Yeah.
I will say there's a couple Italian films that I really do like Suspiria.
Yeah.
I think Spring counts as Italian. I don't know. It
Mm-hmm.
is set in Italy, so
Yeah. And
it's
then
gorgeous.
the other one was, oh shit, I can't remember now, but it was like the end of the death nerve or something like that. That was a really good one too. But otherwise, Demons and all the other Argento films I enjoy, but I don't think there's a lot of rewatchability for me.
Yeah, I'd say opera is probably one that I would hold up pretty high. I really enjoyed that one. But like I said, it has to have some rewatchability for me. And I think Suspiria has the best rewatchability.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful film. But I agree. I like the remake better. And
Well,
that's a matter of, I think, honestly, just because
preference.
yeah, I just prefer newer films, maybe.
I'm the same way. I hate admitting it because I feel like I'm gonna get like hung from the ceiling, but old films like, and this is another reason I avoided the 60s because I can respect it, but I don't enjoy a lot of movies from before the
I'm
70s.
with you on that. So yeah, you're not alone. I
Yeah.
agree. I find that I tend to gravitate more towards 80s and 90s, and late 70s, some of these, but I still don't. I think Jaws, out of all the ones we've talked about so far, I've probably rewatched Jaws the most. Oh no, when we get it, we're gonna get into a couple others
Yeah, I was
that
gonna
I've
say I
rewatched
know of
a lot.
one movie you
Like,
might have watched a lot.
a
Yeah.
lot.
It's
Yeah.
actually next on my list. I don't know if you want to talk about it now or we can save it because I think you know which one I'm probably talking about.
Yeah, but I want to talk about Dawn of the Dead first.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like Dawn of the Dead is appropriate right now.
Because that
Yes.
is one that I do watch a lot too.
Yeah,
So
I
I
think
love Dawn of the Dead, and I think it's by popularity standards one of the most popular zombie movies of all time.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, Night of the Living Dead, I think, is probably one of the few that could top it out, but Dawn of the Dead really came along after a hiatus of zombie films and reignited that genre.
Reinvigorated it for
Yeah.
sure. And so I prefer Dawn of the Dead. It's my favorite zombie film. As far as like the classic living or what are they? Of the Deads.
Yeah,
Like,
right. Day of the Dead,
the
Land of the Dead,
Romero like
all that. Yeah.
tree of zombies.
The Romero grid.
Yeah. Dawn of the Dead is my preference. I even like the remake, the 2004 remake.
It's one of my favorite remakes, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on my top 13 remakes list. I love Dawn of the Dead though for the settings, the characters. Like you really get to live with the characters in this really cool setting. The mall setting is just brilliant. Like,
Yes.
I mean, who wouldn't want to go to a mall during an apocalypse? It's
That's
so
where
smart.
I would go.
Like,
Yeah.
if
And
you live in a city, like, why wouldn't you go there?
I remember thinking that, like, when I first saw Dawn of the Dead, I'm like, I've always thought about a mall as a perfect survival spot, and this movie is doing it, you know?
Exactly.
And it really is. It adds to the tension of the film, and yeah, overall, I think it was a really smart choice.
Yeah, and it brings in a new horror element that I think a lot of zombie movies it's integral to a zombie film. That the zombies are not the only horror, that it's actually the people during an apocalypse that are also the horror.
Yeah.
And I think having some place that most people would converge is so cool. And that's really what sets this film, I think, apart of all the others. Besides the acting, the character development is just so perfect.
Yeah, for a 70s movie, it really is amazing. And like you said, the dual themes of zombies being the monster, but also like everyone hails The Walking Dead as doing that, but George A. Romero was king at this, discussing the two evils, human and monster,
Right. And I think it's really interesting how many different characters he put into this film, and made it kind of the most important aspect. You know, once you start getting zombies, then it's like this added catalyst. But really, it's the characters that are central to this film, not necessarily the zombies.
Yeah.
They're more of a circumstance that's happening to them.
Right.
But the characters are really what's focused. And I think that you don't find that a lot in horror films. And this film definitely made it front and center that character development was key.
Yeah, especially back in those days, it was
1978.
Yeah, it was secondary, and when Romero did it, it came first, and that paid off big time. And obviously, we're talking about influential films. This and Night of the Living Dead really spawned a whole mess of movies from this genre. You know.
Yeah, I'd say the zombie genre subgenre of horror is probably the most prolific if it's not slashers.
Yeah.
It's gotta be zombies.
Yeah, because I don't even think vampires would beat it out, honestly. I think zombies would be it.
I think there's more good vampire movies, but there's more zombie movies.
Yeah, definitely.
That makes sense.
No, absolutely.
But I think, like, how do you feel about this? Because I hear some people say that they're tired of zombie movies. We don't need another zombie movie. Whereas I'm like, I'll always watch a zombie movie.
Yeah, right. I will. I absolutely will. Like Army of the Dead is a perfect example, right? Okay, so
watched it, absolutely.
I saw the trailer and I knew I was gonna watch it. And I knew people were gonna hate it. But me, I had fun with it. I think when it comes to zombies, it's not something I can really be disappointed in. So no, I don't as much.
Have you seen Resort?
No.
So there's a movie called Resort with a Z instead of an S.
Yep.
Resort. I was just looking for a horror movie one day, and I think it was on Netflix, and I was like, "This looks like a B movie, like, but it's a zombie movie, so how bad can it be?" It was so good.
Really?
Impressed.
Okay.
It's probably one of the few like horror movies that I immediately recommend to people because I know nobody's watching it because I almost didn't watch it.
Right.
But I really enjoyed it. It was so good. It was a zombie movie.
I gotta add that to my list then, because so to answer your question, zombies are always going to be a plus for me, and I think there's always going to be something. I mean, eventually people are going to run out of ideas, but I think something can be different with zombies every time, and it's always a fun experience when it comes to zombies. You know, you're reanimating the dead in a huge manner, so it's always going to be good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. So what is on the next?
Yeah, Dawn of the Dead. We got that one down. So you know me, I got one more on my list. Do you want to talk about another one from yours? Because I know you brought a few good ones to the table.
I have one left, and I wasn't necessarily going to talk about it, but I've changed my mind. I think it's important. So
good.
I want to talk about Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot by Toby Hooper. Toby Hooper had quite a decade, didn't he?
He really did, yeah. And I mean, I love Toby Hooper, but yeah, absolutely.
I feel like Salem's Lot is one of the scarier vampire movies out there. I think he did such a good job with it and making this kind of I don't know. For one, again, it's Stephen King. So,
yes. Yeah.
He's already got great source material. But I love the design and the fact that it's this homage to Nosferatu and the way that the creature looks. He didn't make it a good-looking vampire. He made it scary. It is scary.
He really kind of called back to the old school vampire tale. You know what I mean? And
the classic scary vampire.
Admittedly, I haven't seen this movie for probably 15 years now. But I remember it scaring the shit out of me when I watched it the last time.
I recommend you rewatch it again because there's also a lot of like political undertones that a lot of people miss. I mean, Stephen King's known for that. And Toby Hooper did not shy away from including that. There's a lot of, with most vampires, there's a lot of subversion with our sexuality or
the looks or immortality and aging and a lot of other shit that comes with
the cost
vampire.
of it. Yeah. Yeah, so there's still that still exists, but he didn't make the monster good looking, like the choice.
Right.
And
He didn't glitter in the sunlight, you mean?
no, no,
Yeah.
there was no like Lestat Tom Cruise coming around the corner. This
Oh,
is
God.
definitely like a yeah. So it's a fantastic film. I really enjoyed every minute of this movie, and I think for vampire films it's one of the greatest, and I hear that it might be getting a remake, so
I have heard the
I
same.
think it's important to talk about. I mean,
Yeah.
it's clearly important enough that it's honoring or triggering a remake in the years of remakes, and I think everybody should watch it before that remake because Toby Hooper
Definitely.
really nailed it, and it is very scary, and I hope they keep that. I hope they do like they did with the It franchise, and they keep it very, 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 very scary.
Yeah, because something Toby Hooper could do was bring fear to most of the movies he made, and
Hard things to make scary too.
yeah, exactly. And what was I just gonna say?
Sorry.
This isn't talked about enough. I think the fact that you brought it up is amazing because a lot of people talk about it. A lot of people talk about The Stand. A lot of people talk about Pet Sematary. But Salem's Lot, I think, beats out maybe one or two of those movies as far as scare goes,
I agree. I think Salem's Lot is better than all of those, actually. I think the It miniseries was only scary when I was a child. I
Yeah,
don't think it's scary now. I don't think it's nearly as well done. It was made for television. I mean,
it
obviously, they
was.
had some
Yeah.
restraints. And I think Pet Sematary is really great, but I do not have as much fear of a cat and a toddler as I
So,
do a giant, imposing vampire who's trying to build an army,
right.
and the way it's just
Which is,
scary.
it's fair enough. It's fair enough. And I agree mostly, except for Pet Cemetery, because Gage and Zelda scared the living fuck out of me when I was a
Well,
kid.
they
And,
did. Don't get me wrong, they did.
and I think there's nothing else that's going to scare me as much as that little kid with the scalpel cutting that
Cutting
dude's
the
Achilles
Achilles
tendon.
heel. Oh,
Ah,
that is,
yeah.
yeah, that's rough.
Anyway, yeah.
I think for me as an adult who now has children, that movie is more traumatizing for other reasons than it is scary for me. It's
Yeah.
scary for me because I would resurrect my kid and I would let them murder the whole town before
I
I did
can't even
anything about it.
imagine. I mean, I have my
Couldn't.
dog and I'd resurrect him. I can't imagine a kid. So yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, and I just can't stomach child death like I used to before I had kids. And so that
Yeah.
one's just too hard for me now.
I think
But
that's a little understandable.
I think Salem's Lot is scarier. Just in
But yeah,
tone and creature design, it is just I don't know. Toby Hooper is really good about making things that seem impossible to be scary, and for a screen, he
yeah,
does a good job with that
like a
because
toy clown in Poltergeist. I mean, how do you
right,
make
a
that scary?
television,
Yeah, television,
ghosts,
Oh my
like
God.
yeah, he does a good job with that because I mean, a vampire is a human at the end of the day, and it's still kind of hard to like release reality around a vampire because
Yeah.
they're human.
Yep.
And he did a good job making a very scary vampire. I think the only person who's come close to a really terrifying vampire for me was Mike Flanagan in Midnight Mass. Oh, spoiler.
Oh,
That's a big
yeah.
spoiler. If you haven't
Oh
seen Midnight Mass,
man.
I'm sorry.
Oh
Like,
shit. Don't blame me. Blame her. Blame
put a
Justine. It
big
wasn't me.
spoiler warning on there before I said that
Yeah.
because Midnight
Hold
Mass
on.
spoiler.
Let me mark this time down. 117. Okay, I got it. We're gonna have to warn people of that one. Yeah.
Because I don't know how many times I put out like watch Midnight Mass, you guys watch it right now before someone ruins it for you because it takes one word.
And now you're that person that ruined
I'm
it
that
for me.
person,
Good
I'm
job,
sorry.
Justine. No, I'm just kidding.
But there's the vampires are scary.
You're
in
right.
That. He
No,
did
you're
such a good
absolutely right.
job.
They really are. And I agree with you. I won't talk about it more because it's a newer thing and I don't want to spoil it for people like somebody
Right.
else I know. But no.
I will say one thing before we move on is Mike Flanagan is the new Toby Hooper and Stephen King. That's it. That's all.
I haven't thought about it, but you're right. Absolutely.
He's incredible. And
Yeah.
we're actually going to be filming our next podcast talking about Flanagan. So
Yeah.
keep an eye
All
out for
right. I
that.
like it
I love
because yeah,
him.
that's a good comparison.
Yeah.
I like it. So yeah, Salem's Lot. If you haven't seen it, it's definitely one of the better adaptations of Stephen King books. So check it out.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think we both have one more on our list.
The queen of them all.
Yes, and it would be pretty embarrassing if it wasn't the same movie, right?
Right.
I have Alien,
Alien.
1979, and I named my dog after Ripley because she's a badass female. So my dog's name is Ripley because I love this fucking movie so much.
I almost named my daughter Ripley, but
Oh yeah,
her dad said no.
yeah.
So,
See, I was surprised. I was like,
right.
when I mentioned Ripley as a girl name, my girlfriend was like, "Okay." I'm like, "Okay, cool, sweet." But yeah, I think it's a badass name anyway because I don't. So first of all, let's get this off the table. I don't consider Ripley a final girl because she is so badass that she is not on the same level of any final girl that I know in any other horror.
She's my number one final girl. She's the final girl that all final girls should want to be.
And that's absolutely true. I mean, which is why when
But I get what you're saying. I do.
yeah, when I make
And
a
her
final
role.
girl list, I do not add Ripley because that is more obvious than the sky being blue as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I can never not talk about Ripley, and here we are again. I'm going to talk about Ripley and my love of the Alien franchise.
Yeah, and I know it's what your favorite franchise, right? Behind Scream, maybe.
Second favorite, yeah. Scream is my first, and then the Alien franchise is my second favorite.
That's what I thought. Yeah, because I remember thinking, oh my god, she likes the whole franchise, not just the first two movies. Wow. No,
I even like the AVP movies. Like I love all of them.
I like a few of them. Don't get me wrong. The whole franchise, I think, suffered, but you're right. There's really good golden nuggets in that franchise. Yeah. But let's talk about this one. 1979. We're just rolling out of the 70s, and we get hit with Ridley Scott's Alien, the chest burst, everything, all the gory details. Let's hear what you
or
think
lack of gore. So again, we have another film from the 70s that managed to scare the piss out of people, and it had only one scene that had blood, and that was the chest burster
Yes,
scene. Outside
that's
of
true.
that, there was nothing.
Yep.
Alien. First off, I would be remiss without saying Sigourney Weaver's role as Ripley was originally written as a man, and she was cast, and they changed nothing about it. So this is actually also your first reluctant leader role held by a protagonist role held by a woman in horror, and it is the best performance of a female protagonist of all time. She cannot be beat, just like Jaws couldn't be beat. Ripley's and Sigourney Weaver's performance in Aliens, all of them, but specifically Alien and Aliens, those roles cannot be beat. They are the framework of almost every female empowerment role after.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Yep.
She didn't rely on sexuality, but it wasn't that she wasn't sexy.
I was going to say,
written into it.
Like, a straight,
just existed.
As a straight white male, she was absolutely sexy in that role, but not because they made her feel sexy. It was just because she was badass in her presence and her,
right.
You know what I mean? Just the way she came through on screen, she was just sexy and badass, and that's.
Let's not get it twisted. Sigourney Weaver is friggin' gorgeous.
Yeah, right. But
she wears a wife beater and underwear, and we're all like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, they wrote it for a man. It wasn't meant to be sexy, but she brought every angle to that part, including, the badassery.
At no point is she a damsel in distress. She's just strictly a badass. And I think what's so also great about this film is, again, tension, what you're not seeing, the lines you're drawing. This film plays out very much like an action movie where there's a setup, but there's so much tension built that it becomes horrifying very quickly. You're very scared.
Yeah.
And there's this isolation or desolation of space that I think adds to it. That I'm personally afraid of space and underwater style environments. They scare me because there's no escape.
Yeah.
you have nowhere to go. It's almost claustrophobic without being in a small space.
Absolutely. I mean,
It's scary.
so space is one of actually the number one thing that I research and read up on and intrigues me the most, but at the same time scares the complete shit out of me the most because of everything that has to do with space, like
Right.
aliens.
Yeah, and the design of this film is using the Giger style and designs, and using this very smart practical effects that they chose.
Yeah.
They were, again, I had like no budget for this movie.
So this kind of
Again.
I saw a video a couple days ago about the teaser for Alien back in the 70s, right? It was an egg in a pan of overcooked brownies. And all they did was add lighting, a little bit of paint, and it got people talking about this movie called Alien for ages to come. And it's a testament to
Yeah.
what they did with practical effects and the budget they had in order to build an amazing sci-fi horror film.
Yeah, and I will never not associate like lime green and black with Alien.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
those,
Yeah.
those really cold tones and lighting that they chose to use in the first film really made you feel like you were in space and kind of in the future, which is a common trick that they use in futuristic space movies, is to make
Yeah.
it feel cold, use cold lighting. But they didn't do that throughout this entire film, which is very different from other sci-fi films. You'll actually see a lot of warm lighting when it comes to characters and like really intense moments. It's just the way that they used lighting in this film was innovative. It was new. It was not expected. It
Yeah.
humanized these characters more, and it made you feel more connected to what you were watching.
Yeah, definitely. And I always like the tricks directors use to get reactions from actors. And
Yeah.
the one with the chest burst where nobody knew what was going to happen, they didn't rehearse it, and it was the first take,
Right.
absolutely added to the terror of that scene when it happened.
Yeah, a lot of those reactions were really very real. They were not told. They were told that something was going to happen. There was going to be like some splattering blood. They
Yeah.
didn't realize. You can see it actually when you watch the film. There's an initial like a break,
Yep.
and then everybody thinks it's over with, and then it just shoots out of his chest,
Boom. Yeah.
and everybody's reaction and the blood splattering on them was not what they didn't expect. That they didn't expect to get the blood all over them, and
No.
that was pure shock and like
Yeah,
real
all their reactions are real,
reaction.
and it came through on camera. And then, like you said, the creature design alone, the face huggers, and then the xenomorph itself was just like the drool and the fangs and the
metallic teeth and
yeah.
Yeah, and I really love, like, again, the use of green and the pure black, like skin, slimy, like skin, but
Yep.
also the practical effects. The fact that this is a guy in a suit doing this, it creates this realism to it that is so believable, but also is why it stands the test of time.
Yeah.
The practical effects are king. You can't not do practical effects.
No, there's a few
And the minute you
movies
don't,
there's a few movies that do it. Alien, The Thing, and a few others that really drive home what you can do with practical effects and how they hold up better than CGI today.
Exactly. And I'm
You know?
so glad that they didn't like rely on them later in the earlier parts of the franchise, because you could really tell it just looks good
Yeah,
today. And
definitely.
that's why, again, rewatchability, it's up there. Aliens is my favorite out of the franchise, but Alien is second. So
Yeah.
I think that Alien and Aliens make it into like my top 20.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense. Aliens isn't my favorite. Alien would always be my favorite, but it's very rare for a sequel to be right up there with the original anyway. So,
right. Well, and again, like an entire franchise for me, the whole franchise is amazing. Just like the Scream franchise, it's almost like they can't do wrong at this point, in my opinion. I'm excited. There's I think a series and another film coming out for the Alien universe.
Unlike you, am hopeful that we get something close to the original because I haven't enjoyed the past few entries we've gotten, but
Right.
I am hopeful because there's so much potential. Prometheus, for example, was, I think, actually really good, even though it was mixed with people.
I think
Just,
it's like my third favorite. I really
yeah,
liked Prometheus.
that took the potential of the universe and kind of put it on screen and showed what can come of it, you know.
Did I tell you about my experience watching Prometheus the first time? I had just gotten
Possibly,
back
but
from
let's hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just gotten
Mm.
back from deployment. I had not been exposed to really a lot of media, obviously. What's
Deployment,
going
first of all, hold on. Deployment, what do you mean?
from the military? I was in the army.
You
So I was
were?
in, yeah, I think I was coming back from Afghanistan when Prometheus came out,
Well,
or
thank you for your
Iraq.
service because I didn't know that, first of all. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, so no, I didn't hear this part. So you came back and saw Prometheus.
Yeah, let me see if I can look up the date that it actually came out so I can give you better exacts. Yeah, so I just gotten back from Afghanistan. I was about to just get out of the army.
Wow.
And one of the first things I did is I went to the movies and I saw Prometheus. And I had no clue that this was part of the Alien franchise. I
Oh,
had no
really?
idea whatsoever. And I remember watching it in theater and I remember going like, oh my God, those look so much like the egg pods from Alien. And those statues, they're using Giger. This is obviously like a nod, like to
Yeah,
the
like,
Alien
oh, this is such an
franchise.
Easter egg.
They
Yeah.
must be like such big fans. I mean, who isn't? But here's the problem. Like every movie in space that has to do with like a horror or alien horror or anything
Yeah.
has taken things from Alien. They have
That's
used it
fair.
as
Yep.
inspiration or have paid, their homage to it. Like here's at the altar of Alien, we present to you our sacrifice,
Yeah,
like they've all
definitely.
done that. So
Yeah.
this is all I'm thinking is this is a movie that really loved Alien, that wanted to do another Giger-esque style alien horror, and I'm for it. I'm all for it. So I'm like really enjoying this movie, and of course it gets to the end.
Yep. Right after, because we see
There's the
credits.
snake thing that like breaks
Yeah.
the guy's arm and then goes
Yeah.
into his mouth, and I'm like, oh my God, that reminds me of Facehuggers. That's so
Yeah.
good.
He's giving birth. Yeah. So
And then,
we get the credits first before we get the ending, though, right? Or at least some of the
yeah,
credits.
sort of. So
Yeah.
you get to the ending, and there's this giant, like, it's like a starfish, this like proto face hugger, but it's
Yeah.
massive,
Yeah.
and it latches onto the dude, and it covers his face, and it completely envelops, the
Right. Yeah.
one of the
And
what are
he's
they called
fighting it
again?
on the door. He's like,
The
"Ah."
engineers, yeah,
Yes.
and it
Yeah.
sucks them in, and
Yes.
yeah. So I immediately thought of face huggers again for that moment, of course. But again, this isn't, Alien started it, but it hasn't not been done again over and
Yeah.
over again since.
Right.
You have the puppet masters. There's all sorts of
There's so many
You're gonna
things
have
out
that
there.
type of, Invasion of the Body Snatchers style, which is another great from.
Absolutely.
I don't think I talked about.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Invasion of Body Snatchers needs to be an honorable mention for sure. And
or is that in the
100
'80s?
It might have been early 80s, but I would
Anyways.
also like to state that I 100% think Predator was spawned from Alien and the success it found, because I mean, it's not a coincidence that we got Alien vs. Predator down the line anyway, It was
Right.
we always get a competitor to a successful franchise, and I think Predator was spawned from the success from Alien.
Absolutely.
And I love Predator and Alien, so I am glad for both of them. And
I want to say that some of the design of the Predator, early design of the Predator, they had to change because it was too reminiscent of a xenomorph.
I don't know if it's probably common knowledge by now, but Jean-Claude Van Damme was playing the Predator for a while, and in the costume they were using, it was very Alien-esque or Xenomorph-esque, and
he was too dancery.
Yes, exactly. He was too dancery. He was too hot in the costume. It didn't work, and that's why we got the Predator that we have now. Yeah,
big hulking monster hunter.
Yeah. Yep.
So with Prometheus, we get to like the ending, and I think of that facehugger and the credits roll. And I have always, since high school, been someone who watches credits.
Yeah.
Not just in case there's like after credit scenes, but because that was something my high school history of films teacher told me I should always do, so that I know who's making things. like who's behind some of these films.
Right.
So if you like it, stick around and watch the credits, is what he always used to tell us. Anyway,
Yeah.
you might start seeing some
He
names
has a
that you
point.
can
Yeah,
follow.
you
And it's
start
true. I mean,
recognizing
here
it.
I
Yeah.
am today as an avid film lover who I never miss Easter eggs.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. Even though back then I was probably, I wasn't into as many films as I was now. But it's a good point. If you want to know who's making your films, who's doing the score,
Yeah.
who's doing the filming, everything,
And you can follow their filmography. So yeah, this, proto xenomorph pops out of his body. It's not even like the little one. It's like a full on, has the like
Yeah.
elongated head. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
he's got
oh
the
my
whole-
God. I screamed like that in theater. I was like, it's a xenomorph. I was so, and people were looking at me like I was crazy.
Yeah, like you have no idea the whole movie because
I had no clue. One of my favorite like home theater or movie theater experiences.
I didn't know until, I don't know, a month before Prometheus came out that it was part of the universe. And then I found out and rewatched the movies before I went there. But imagine if you got up, left before the credits, and didn't find out till like 4 years later that it was part of the universe.
Yeah. In fact, I think that like Prometheus did such a good job by introducing the engineers. I think that was one of the cooler aspects.
I was going to say the whole creation of life, or creators / engineers, was a really good story plot point. Yeah.
And then Elizabeth Shaw was great too. And that's probably why, to me, the subsequent ones were not as good.
Yeah.
Was because they kind of got rid of two of the best aspects of the reboot or the requel.
Yeah. The requel, right?
Yeah. So
yeah,
I can understand the like complaints, which is why they are lower on my list.
Right. Yeah, because Covenant had her just dead from the get-go, right?
She was like a mangled corpse when we see her next.
Like, she's an amazing actress. I don't remember what happened, but it was a shame we didn't get her again.
Yeah, I agree.
But that movie was great, and that just speaks to the influence that Alien had on movies, period, the franchise, period, and creature features all around. Yeah.
Yes, and creature features, I think I would say is like my second favorite subgenre. I say that very wearily because I swear I say something different every time I think about it.
I'm probably the same way, because I'll say
someone's gonna call me out one day. You said this was your second favorite.
Yeah, I know, right?
And they're just gonna splice a bunch of footage of me like
there's always some commenter
contradicting myself.
Well, you said that this was your third favorite on December 13th, 19th. You know what I mean?
I love horror, and it changes all the time. Like, I would guess that my top 100 is not even my top 100. Like, the very day after I did it.
Right off the bat, I can tell you that Pumpkinhead and Nightmare on Elm Street 2 switch between my number one horror movie of all time. I can tell you
that's interesting.
It is interesting.
Didn't the Pumpkinhead creature design, wasn't that like supposed to be the original Predator?
Something like that, yeah. And and that's goes to say that like creature feature can be my number one horror movie because Pumpkinhead. But it switches all the time. So like you, I'm always telling something different. And it's like, well, it depends on the day or the week or the month. I don't know.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and like, it does depend because, again, rewatchability ranks so high for me. I would not have told you, like, the year before last. So 2020, I would not have said that Fright Night, the remake, would have been in my top 100. I would not have thought that. Right. But I watched it like 20 times last year during COVID.
Wow.
Because I really liked it. And it's such a good movie.
I do like that movie. I know a lot of people shit on it. I do like it. Do I think it would break my top 100? Probably not, but I do respect your choice. Yeah.
I love horror comedies, which is my number one favorite subgenre, is horror comedies, meta, self-aware horror. And I think Fright Night remake was just, it's so funny.
It was good. And I like Colin Farrell. I know people like to hate him, but I kind of like him. So
do people hate Colin Farrell? How dare you?
I think nowadays, yeah.
Did he do something I don't know about? God,
Probably. I can't keep up with that. I just found out that Jared Leto is some kind of Chester. I have no idea anymore. My favorite.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I
I'm
heard
just
he was
learning.
like culty, maybe, but like who
Yeah,
isn't in Hollywood anymore?
I'm learning new things every day. That's why I watch my words until I hear something. You just got to be careful nowadays.
Yeah, so I would say like sometimes when you know stuff, it's good to acknowledge it. But if you don't know, like you guys
Yeah.
gotta cut us some slack. We watch a lot of
Separate.
media.
Yeah, right. Separate the artist from the art until you know for sure what's going on.
Right.
It's like
So like,
Jeepers Creepers, right?
I was gonna say that's a perfect example. I don't watch those movies. I will
Yeah,
watch the newest one because it's gonna be completely devoid of him. But
exactly.
I don't
Yep.
watch them. As soon as I found out, I stopped watching them. I don't put them on my lists on any of my rankings.
Yeah.
I won't discuss it outside of this.
Exactly. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not to call attention
It's
to it. It's just
unfortunate because the artwork and the people behind it were probably really great besides him.
yeah, the crew
But
did an amazing job besides that asshole. And not to bring any attention to his movie, but that's an example of what happens when you're a douchebag. We erase your shit right
and
off
from
the
what I
list.
understand, it was known before he made Jeepers Creepers. So I feel like everybody who was behind that film and supported that film, creating that film, are complicit. You can't
Yeah.
do that.
I mean, yep.
You can't make a film with someone like that. Just like I am okay with talking about Rosemary's Baby, but any movie after that, after he married his daughter, I will not support.
Yeah.
Any movie after that, no thank you.
I was gonna actually honorable mention the 60s and Rosemary's Baby, but I forgot about it anyway. But you're right. Anything after that, it's kind of like, all right, we
Yeah,
have
once
to
it's
ignore it.
known, once everybody knows, you have no excuse for working with him.
Yeah,
Like,
no, definitely
I
not.
can't support your film. I'm sorry. Get a different
And
role or job.
people seem to forget Jeepers Creepers is how old, but no matter what, if you're watching it on a streaming service, he's getting royalties
Yeah,
from that movie.
he is. Yeah,
And let's not
absolutely.
forget that creepy ass scene on part 2 that's literally tied to his fantasy of fucking sickness. So, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
No, thank
reason we
you.
don't talk about that anymore. So, moving on.
Exactly. It's
The 70s. We talked about the 70s. You know what? I'm going to save my opinion and I'm going to ask you to save your opinion for your favorite decade until we finish this series.
perfect.
Yeah, because I think so
I
I'm
don't
just
know
going
if
to
I
say
have a favorite decade. I can think of a couple that are definitely
right. So
in
at the end
contention,
we
but
can
we'll decide at
mention
the end, I think.
what our favorites are, but this is one of the best decades of horror. And if we missed anything, if you want to add something, go ahead and pop it in the comments. Like I
Yeah.
said, we're going to start 80s on Justine's channel next, so keep an eye out for that. And I'm going to link everything in the description anyway. But otherwise, do you have anything else to add?
No. I don't know if you heard my dog bark right there.
Yeah, she's like, no, get off, bitch.
I want to go outside.
Yeah, right.
I don't have anything to add outside of, I think the 70s is the jumping point for horror where it really kicked its feet up and started to like take off. And I think that's why it's kind of a foundation for a lot of films, a lot of inspirations taken from this era, and why it's a lot of people's favorites because these films are just classics. It's not my favorite genre, so I will give you that hint, but I do really enjoy these films that we talked about. And they're great. They're just
absolutely
great
films. And that's why we kicked it off from the 70s, because I think that's probably where everything really began.
Really began. Yeah, totally.
No, I think honestly, this was a long episode, but I think it was worth it. If you guys stuck around for it, congrats, because I think this is a great conversation. But otherwise,
if I'm on your channel, it's an hour and 20 minutes, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. I'm okay with that. Next, we're gonna really dig into it. The 80s is a big subject for horror, and it's probably going to be a two-parter, so make sure you check back for it. Otherwise, fandomatrandom.com, check it out all the time. Just enough. I'll post her links at the bottom, and
the Let Us In podcast.
Yes, and the Let Us In podcast, very important, because that's very good too.
Thank you.
All right, guys.